My husband laughed at me for years, and I let him, because I thought laughter was better than silence. I was wrong. Laughter can be its own kind of cruelty when it's aimed at you instead of shared with you. I want to tell you about the moment I stopped mistaking mockery for affection, and how that realization ended a 14-year marriage. It started so quietly, I almost missed it. In the early years, his laughter felt warm. He'd tease me about burning toast or getting lost on familiar streets, and I'd laugh too, because it felt like we were in on the same joke. But somewhere along the way, the joke stopped being about moments and started being about me, my intelligence, my appearance, my dreams, and I kept laughing along, because I didn't know how to do anything else without unraveling the life we'd built. I remember the night I told him I wanted to go back to school to finish the degree I'd paused when we had our first child. I had researched programs for weeks, stayed up after the kids were asleep, filling out applications, rehearsing how I'd explain the tuition. When I finally told him, he laughed. Not a cruel laugh at first glance, just a short exhale through his nose, the kind that says cute without saying it. Then he said, "You? Going back to school at your age, with everything going on here? Who's going to run this house, sweetheart?" And everyone at the table, his brother, his sister-in-law, laughed along like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. I laughed too. That's the part that still sits heavy in my chest. I laughed at my own dream being dismissed because I didn't know what else to do with the silence that would have followed if I hadn't. That became the pattern. I'd bring up something that mattered to me, a promotion I wanted to apply for, a friendship I wanted to nurture, a hobby I wanted to try, and he'd find the punchline in it before I even finished the sentence. In front of his friends, he called my attempt at painting kindergarten art. In front of my own parents, he joked that my cooking had improved from inedible to just bad. Everyone chuckled. I chuckled loudest of all, because if I laughed first, it hurt less when everyone else did too. I used to tell myself he didn't mean it, that this was just his sense of humor, that some men show affection through teasing because tenderness was never modeled for them growing up. I made excuses for years. I built an entire architecture of justifications to protect a version of my marriage that only existed in my head. The children grew older, and I started noticing something that broke me in a different way. My daughter started laughing at herself the same way I did. Quick, preemptive, apologetic. She'd trip and laugh before anyone could react. She'd get an answer wrong at the dinner table and immediately laugh at herself, glancing at her father to see if she'd done it correctly, if she'd successfully diffused the moment before he could turn it into a joke. I watched my own coping mechanism take root in my daughter, and it terrified me more than anything he had ever said directly to me. Still, I didn't leave. I told myself 14 years wasn't something you throw away over jokes. I told myself I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much like my mother, who he often said couldn't take a joke either. I absorbed all of it and kept absorbing because leaving felt like admitting 14 years had been a mistake, and some part of me wasn't ready to grieve something I had poured my whole adult life into. The final night came at his 40th birthday party. 40 of our closest family and friends packed into our backyard, string lights overhead, the smell of grilled food drifting through the evening air. Someone asked him to say a few words, and he stood, drink in hand, thanking everyone for coming. Then he turned to me with that familiar grin, the one that used to make my stomach flip with love and now just made it tighten with dread. He said, "And of course, my wife, who still can't parallel park after 20 years of driving, but hey, at least she's consistent." The yard erupted in laughter. My own sister laughed. My mother-in-law wiped a tear from laughing so hard, and I stood there in my own backyard, at my own husband's party, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in 14 years of marriage. But this time, something didn't happen the way it always had. I didn't laugh. I felt the silence stretch out from me like a shadow growing longer as the sun set. People noticed. His smile faltered slightly, waiting for my laugh to complete the joke the way it always had, waiting for me to be the punchline that finishes itself. I didn't give it to him. I set my glass down on the table beside me, and in front of everyone, I said, "I've spent 14 years being your favorite joke, and I'm done laughing at myself so you don't have to feel bad about how you talk to me." The yard went quiet in a way string lights and grilled food had never witnessed before. He tried to recover, said I was being sensitive, that it was his birthday, that I was ruining the mood. But I didn't sit back down. I walked into the house, past the confused faces of people who had laughed at me for years without ever once wondering if I wanted to laugh too. I filed for divorce 3 weeks later. He was stunned. He kept saying he didn't understand what he'd done wrong, that it was just jokes, that I was overreacting to things that never bothered me before. But they had bothered me every single time. I had simply gotten so good at hiding it that even I started to believe the performance. The divorce took 8 months. There were nights I doubted myself, moments where his confusion made me question if I really had a right to leave over something as small as laughter. But then I would watch my daughter, who slowly, month by month, stopped laughing at her own mistakes before anyone else could. I would watch her raise her hand in class and answer confidently, without the nervous, preemptive giggle she'd absorbed from me. That alone told me everything I needed to know about whether I'd made the right choice. I live in a smaller house now, quieter, humbler in some ways, but it is entirely mine. My daughter and I have a rule in our home now. We only laugh at things that are actually funny, and never at each other's dreams, mistakes, or hopes. It sounds like such a small thing, but after 14 years, it feels revolutionary. Sometimes I see him at school events, polite, distant, still slightly bewildered as to how a marriage he thought was fine ended over just jokes. I don't explain it to him anymore. Some people will never understand that laughter aimed at someone's dignity isn't humor. It's erosion, one small joke at a time, until there's nothing left of the person you used to be before you learn to laugh at your own reflection just to survive the room. If you've ever laughed along with something that quietly broke you, I hope you find the moment where the laughter stops. I hope you find your own version of setting the glass down and refusing to be the punchline one more time.